Look at these two tomato plants. One is chest high, thick as a broom handle, and absolutely loaded with fruit. The other is spindly, yellow at the edges, and maybe, if you squint, it has three sad little tomatoes the size of marbles. They were planted on the same day, from the same packet of seeds in the same soil. The difference between them is 9 specific mistakes that almost every beginner makes. And I know this because I made every single one of them myself, for years, before I finally started listening to people who actually knew what they were doing. Hand on heart, how many of you have a garden that looks exactly like that second plant right now? I know the feeling all too well. You put in the work, you water religiously, you even talk to them, and still, the harvest is a handful of nothing. It is honestly kind of frustrating. But here is the thing that gets me every time. Each of these mistakes is not a mystery. It is a single, simple decision you can fix right now, today, with nothing more than a little knowledge and maybe some kitchen scissors. No magic sprays, no expensive fertilizers, and certainly no gardening degree required. The reason you have likely never heard the full list laid out this plainly is kind of annoying. It is not that the information is secret. It is that good, practical gardening advice gets buried under an avalanche of products. Every problem you encounter, there is a bottle, a bag, or a gadget sold as the solution. The real solution, 9 times out of 10, is changing what you do, not buying something new. My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalska, has been growing tomatoes on her little patch of ground for over 40 years. Her plants look like small trees every single summer, and she has never once set foot in a big box garden center. She saves her seeds in paper envelopes. She feeds her soil with nothing but her own compost. And she finally got tired of watching me struggle and decided to share what she actually looks for. What she told me was not a product list. It was a list of corrections. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. These are the 9 mistakes. And if you can avoid them, you will have more tomatoes than you know what to do with. Let me just show you. The first mistake is the one that hurts the most, because it feels like love. Overwatering. I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. Probably something like, but it is hot, the soil looks dry, I should give them a drink. I completely understand your approach. I thought exactly the same thing until I killed about a dozen plants with kindness. Here is what is actually happening under the soil when you water too often. Tomato roots need oxygen as much as they need water. When the soil is constantly saturated, those roots are drowning. They literally cannot breathe. And a drowning root cannot take up nutrients. So your plant turns yellow, not from a lack of anything in the soil, but because the roots have shut down. The leaves curl. The bottom starts looking sad. And the first instinct of every beginner is to water it more, because it looks wilted. It is a death spiral. The fix is not a schedule. Do not water every day because it is Tuesday. Stick your finger into the soil, right down to the second knuckle. If it feels cool and slightly damp down there, walk away. The plant is fine. When you do water, water deeply. I mean really soak the ground, so the water goes down deep and the roots chase it. Shallow, frequent watering trains the roots to stay near the surface, where they dry out fast and panic. A deep, infrequent soak makes a plant that can handle a hot afternoon without drama. Mrs. Kowalska told me she waters her tomatoes twice a week in the peak of summer, and she drenches them. Twice a week. I was watering mine every evening like I was tucking them into bed. I was the problem. The second mistake is the exact opposite, and it is sneakier because it does not look like a problem until it is too late. Inconsistent watering. This is the classic weekend gardener move. You ignore the plants all week, come out Saturday morning to find the soil cracked and the leaves drooping, so you panic and flood the whole bed. Then you go back to ignoring them. The plant responds to this cycle the only way it knows how. It freaks out. A tomato plant that goes through drought and flood cycles will develop blossom and rot faster than anything else. You know the one. The bottom of the fruit turns black and leathery. It looks like a disease, but it is not. It is a calcium deficiency. And the maddening part is, there is usually plenty of calcium in the soil. The plant just cannot move it to the fruit because calcium moves with water. And if the water flow is constantly stopping and starting, the calcium gets stuck in the leaves. The fruit at the end of the line starves. The solution is mulch, and it costs almost nothing. A 2-inch layer of straw, shredded leaves, or even plain grass clippings from a lawn that has not been sprayed with anything, spread around the base of the plant. That layer keeps the soil moisture steady. It stops the surface from baking into a crust. It keeps the soil temperature even. And as it breaks down, it feeds the soil. I have used straw for years now, and the difference in how often I need to water is dramatic. The soil under the mulch stays damp and cool for days longer. Steady water, steady growth, no black bottoms. That is the whole idea. The third mistake is where we start to get into the physical structure of the plant itself, and this one is purely about impatience. Planting too early. I have done this. You get a warm weekend in April, the sun is out. The garden center has those beautiful little starts, and you just cannot wait to get them in the ground. So you plant them, and then a cold night rolls in, the temperature drops below 50, and your tomato plant just sits there and shivers. Tomatoes are not hardy. They are tropical plants from South America. When the soil is cold, their roots do not grow. The plant stalls. It turns a little purple from phosphorus deficiency, not because the phosphorus is not there, but because the cold roots cannot absorb it. And a plant that sits stunted for 3 weeks in cold soil will never catch up to a plant put in warm soil 2 weeks later. The later plant will outgrow it, outproduce it, and stay healthier the whole season. Wait until the soil is warm. Not the air, the soil. A simple rule is when you can comfortably sit on the bare ground with no pants on and it does not feel cold, it is time. Or just wait until nighttime temperatures are reliably above 55 degrees. For most of us, that is a week or 2 after the last frost date, not on it. Patience here is not a virtue. It is a yield multiplier. The fourth mistake is the one that feels mean, and beginners resist it because it looks like you are hurting the plant. Not pruning. A tomato plant left to its own devices will become a jungle. It will put out suckers from every joint, and every sucker becomes a new branch, and every branch wants to make flowers and fruit. That sounds good in theory, but in practice, you get a massive tangled bush with terrible airflow, and half the fruit never sees the sun. The plant splits its energy 100 ways, and ends up producing a lot of tiny, late green fruit that never ripens. And in that dense, humid tangle, fungal diseases explode. Early blight, septoria leaf spot, they all love a crowded tomato plant with no air movement. You have to prune. For indeterminate varieties, the ones that keep growing all season, you need to pinch out the suckers. A sucker is that little shoot that grows in the crotch between the main stem and a leaf branch. Pinch it off with your fingers when it is small. Leave the main stem and maybe 1 or 2 strong leaders, but do not let it bush out sideways. The plant will direct its energy into fewer, but much larger, healthier fruit. And the air will move through the plant, drying the leaves and keeping the fungi at bay. It feels destructive the first time you do it, but I promise you, a well-pruned tomato plant is a productive tomato plant. The fifth mistake is the partner to pruning, and it is just as important. Not providing support, or providing support too late. A tomato plant is not a tree. It cannot hold itself up under the weight of its own fruit. If you let it sprawl on the ground, the fruit touches the soil. Soil contact means rot, slug damage, and every soil-borne disease splashing up onto the leaves when it rains. You need a support system, and you need it in place when you plant, not a month later when you are trying to wrestle a tangled monster into a cage. The simplest, most bomb-proof support I have found is the Florida weave for a row of plants. You drive sturdy posts at the ends, and every few plants along the row. Then you run heavy twine down one side of the plants, around the end post, and back up the other side, sandwiching the plants between 2 lines of twine. Add a new level of twine every 8 inches of growth. It is fast, it is cheap, and it holds an entire row upright through a windstorm. For single plants, a heavy-duty concrete reinforcing wire cage, the kind with 6-inch squares, is the gold standard. The openings are big enough to get your hand through to harvest, and the cage will last a decade. Those flimsy little 3-ring tomato cages they sell at the discount store are a joke. They will buckle by July. Save your money and build something real. The 6th mistake is feeding them wrong. And this is where the fertilizer aisle gets overwhelming. There are numbers and promises and pictures of impossibly red tomatoes on every bag. But the core mistake beginners make is giving them too much nitrogen. Nitrogen grows leaves. It makes a plant tall and green and lush and absolutely gorgeous, with no fruit. Or very little fruit. Mrs. Kowalska told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "You do not feed the plant. You feed the soil, and the soil feeds the plant what it needs when it needs it. If you have good compost worked into the bed before planting, you are already halfway there. Compost is a slow-release, balanced meal. If you are going to use a fertilizer, look at the 3 numbers on the bag. They stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, in that order. For tomatoes, you want a higher middle number, the phosphorus, which supports flowering and fruiting. Something like a 5-10-5 or a 4-6-3. Avoid the high first number lawn fertilizers. That is like feeding your tomatoes nothing but candy. You will get a beautiful green bush and no BLT. The 7th mistake is one I did not believe until I saw it with my own eyes. Ignoring the soil temperature at the root zone. This is different from the air temperature we talked about for planting time. Even in the middle of summer, if you have heavy, wet clay soil, it can stay cool while the air is blazing. A tomato's roots want warmth. They thrive when the soil is consistently between 65 and 80 degrees. In cool soil, the root system is sluggish. It does not pump nutrients efficiently. The plant sits there looking okay, but it never really takes off. The old gardener trick for this is so simple it feels like cheating. A layer of black plastic mulch, or even black landscape fabric, laid over the soil a week or 2 before you plant. The sun heats the plastic, and the plastic heats the soil. It also suppresses weeds and holds in moisture. I started doing this in my cooler, heavier beds, and the growth difference was undeniable. The plants with warm feet simply outgrew the others. If black plastic feels too synthetic for you, a thick layer of dark compost also absorbs more heat than bare light-colored soil. The principle is the same. Warm roots, happy plant. The 8th mistake is planting them in the same spot year after year. This is the slow burn problem. It does not kill your plants in a week. It kills them over 3 or 4 seasons, and you do not even realize it is happening until one year the whole crop just crashes early. The soil builds up pathogens that are specific to tomatoes. Fusarium wilt, verticillium wilt nematodes. They overwinter in the soil, and they are waiting for you to plant another tomato there so they can feast. It is like setting out a welcome mat for the exact diseases you are trying to avoid. You have to rotate. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes are all in the nightshade family. Do not follow one with another. Move your tomatoes to a bed that has not seen a nightshade for at least 3 years. If you only have a small space, this is harder, but it is not impossible. Grow them in large containers for a season to break the cycle. Or solarize the soil by covering it with clear plastic in the peak of summer heat to cook the pathogens out. It is not as good as rotation, but it is better than doing nothing. The point is to not let the bad guys set up a permanent home. The 9th and final mistake is the one that breaks my heart every time I see it, because it is so easy to fix, and the result is so dramatic. Harvesting too late, or not harvesting enough. A tomato plant has one biological goal: to make seeds. When a fruit ripens fully on the vine, turns deep red and starts to soften, the plant gets a hormonal signal that says, "Job done, mission accomplished." And it starts to slow down. It puts less energy into new flowers and new fruit, because it thinks it has already won. If you pick your tomatoes at what is called the breaker stage, when they are just starting to show color at the blossom end, maybe a blush of pink or orange, the plant does not get that signal. It thinks it still has work to do. It keeps pumping out new flowers, trying to achieve its seed quota. You take those blushing tomatoes inside, put them on a counter out of direct sun, and they will ripen perfectly in a few days. The flavor is identical to vine ripened because by the breaker stage, the fruit has already cut itself off from the main vascular system and is ripening on its own sugars. And the plant, freed from the burden of its ripening fruit, makes more. Keep picking and the plant keeps producing. It is the single highest leverage habit change you can make. Go out every other day with a basket and take anything with a hint of color. Your total harvest over the season will be noticeably larger. I tested this side by side one year, two identical plants. When I let fruit fully ripen on the vine, one I picked at breaker stage. The breaker stage plant produced nearly a third more fruit by weight over the season. It is not magic. It is just plant biology. So those are the 9 mistakes. Overwatering, inconsistent watering, planting too early, not pruning, not providing support, feeding too much nitrogen, ignoring root zone temperature, not rotating crops, and harvesting too late. If you go back to that image of the two plants, the chest-high monster and the sad little spindly one, the difference is not talent. It is not a green thumb. It is just not doing these 9 things wrong. I spent years making every single one of these mistakes, sometimes all of them in a single season, and my harvests were laughable. I blamed the weather, the soil, the seed company. But the problem was always my own choices. Mrs. Kowalska does not have a secret. She just has a lifetime of paying attention, of watching what the plant actually responds to, and of not being seduced by quick fixes. The knowledge is old and simple, and it works. It does not require a lot of money or special equipment. It just requires you to be a little more observant and a little less impulsive. The thing that gets me every time is how much of this wisdom is right there, available for free, passed down from people who have been growing food their whole lives, and we ignore it because it does not come in a shiny package with a barcode. We are not afraid to experiment, but sometimes the best experiment is just doing what the old-timers have been telling us all along. If this helped you see your garden a little differently, if it saved you from even one of these mistakes this season, then consider passing it on. Share it with someone who just put their first tomatoes in the ground. Subscribe if you want to keep learning the kind of practical, tested knowledge that does not come from a marketing department. And leave a comment about which of these mistakes you have made. I bet I have made all of them. I will see you in the next one.